Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special Christmas episode. So Merry Christmas, everybody. And today we have the co-founders of the Personal Agility Institute, Maria Matarelli and Peter Stevens, joining us. So hi, Maria. Hi, Peter.
Hi, how's it going?
Hey, Vasco.
So it's a pleasure to have you. So Peter is located in Europe, Zurich, if I remember correctly.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And Maria in the US. Whereabouts, Maria?
Yes. St. Petersburg, Florida.
St. Petersburg, Florida. I have a client nearby. I love Florida, by the way, although it is a little bit too hot in summer for me, but otherwise it's just the perfect place to be.
Yep, that's fair.
So Maria is a co-founder of the Personal Agility Institute, apologies for that, an organization focused on helping individuals and organizations apply Agile to do more of what matters. She has a background in IT project management and helps companies by showing them how to implement Agile techniques that help them get to market faster. And Peter, who's also a co-founder of the Personal Agility Institute and creator of the Personal Agility System, as he puts it, he inspires people to change their situation for the better and helps companies transform into more effective and more successful and happier organizations. Personal agility is one of the topics we have this Christmas bonus, which is related to business agility. So let's dive into it. So guys, can you share with us the journey that took you to work with and defined the personal agility framework? What were the problems you were trying to solve?
Okay, well, I think I'll take this question to start because, I was kind of there at the beginning and Maria was what we call the first follower, which is a very important concept in leadership. We'll come back to that in a second. So we're looking at around March 2016. I had discovered Scrum, a long time ago, and Scrum changed my life. It was the first way of kind of organizing people that actually made sense. And I started doing Scrum projects fairly early on, at least for Switzerland, fairly early on, and very quickly found myself training and coaching people around Scrum. And in 2012, I became a certified Scrum trainer, and I have my own business as an independent trainer. And as I say, 4 years later, I kind of realized I'm working like crazy. Business is okay. I had nothing to complain about business, but it wasn't really, I didn't feel like I was making any headway in terms of creating something more sustainable. I was just running and running and running. And I was thinking, what's wrong here? What do I need to do? And I kind of got the idea, maybe you could apply Scrum to the problem of running your business. And before that, I'd been doing things like personal Kanban and desktop Kanban. I had this line of Post-its going around my workstation or around my screen and off onto the external monitor and then around the hallway. And, one day I realized, actually, the problem isn't limiting work in progress. I'm pretty good at focusing on one thing. The problem is my backlog is too big. And, this was, so I kind of started with experimenting. Well, how can I decide which things which things am I actually going to do and which things am I going to put off or maybe not do at all? And that kind of started me on a voyage of discovery. I started talking about it in various communities, learned about the common concept of navigation stars, kind of what guides your life, true north. And by October or so, I had discovered the question, what really matters is kind of a guiding principle. It wasn't about being more productive or getting more done. It was about, kind of having more purpose. So I met Maria. I think we were calling it Scrum Day Portugal back then. I think so. In any case, we were in Porto. We had a very, very brief conversation about personal agility. And, she was or she's still doing agile marketing. And I thought, I need to know something about marketing. And she was creating a training program. And I thought, we have something to talk about. So anyway, we agreed to chat with each other at the Scrum gathering in Munich 2 weeks later. And that's where we had a deeper conversation. And one of the key questions that I asked Maria, as I was trying to explain to her what's personal agility all about, I said, Maria, what really matters to you? Okay. And this is where she started kind of chewing on the question. And I'll let Maria answer the question. What mattered to you then? And how did getting that question change what mattered to you?
Yeah. So I realized that even just taking the time to pause and ask that powerful question, there wasn't a lot. And there are a lot of things I thought that mattered that didn't really matter at all. And I was so focused on building business and doing consulting and traveling the world and doing these great things that my health was severely challenged. I found myself in and out of the hospital. And I realized all my goals really didn't even matter if I didn't prioritize my health. And so I started looking at everything completely differently in my life and realizing that I needed to prioritize myself first, needed to make sure that I was good before I could help others, before I could do anything else in business. And so it was really a foundational shift for me. And, fast forward, we were able to help people from all around the world in a variety of different types of situations, people struggling to barely get by, to being able to launch their own business, be successful, clear over 6 figures, double their salary, double it again the next year. And it's just absolutely incredible to see when you start with really getting clear on what really matters and then having the visibility of this simple framework to be able to see what you're doing, see what your actions, how they align with the things that you say that matter. It can make all the difference.
So we'll dive into the framework and what it is in a second. But actually, so as I was preparing for this interview, I looked through the Personal Agility Institute website, and I love the stories that you had there, the first-person testimonies that you have there for people to go through and read through. And of course, we love stories here on the podcast. So I wanted to ask you guys to walk us through at least one of those stories in a way that helps us to understand what personal agility is or could be for us as Scrum Masters.
Yeah, I've got one that comes to mind, and Peter might have one to chime in with as well. About 2 years ago, I was working with an executive team here in the Tampa Bay area, and their CEO was just a visionary, was a very strong leader, though would take on a lot himself and would not necessarily delegate as much. And so what we were finding was that there wasn't a lot of balance for him and leading his team. It was just a lot. I mean, I believe we drew a pie chart. 95% of his focus was all work and only 5% for everything else in life, which is not really sustainable or balanced. And so what we started doing is leading a work on personal agility. And then we had coaching calls every week. And what came from that was really quite incredible, because they had these realizations, being able to connect with each other as a leadership team, being able to understand what was important to each other, connecting on a deeper level, even though some of them had known each other for over 10 years, and they were learning more about each other than ever before, because it's that powerful question of what really matters and taking that holistic view of your life. And so even being able to connect on a personal level established so much trust that the CEO was able to trust the team more and delegate more, and spun up a couple of different working pods. And they were actually able to hit a $35 million valuation in just a year and a half. And they achieved a 3-year roadmap in 1 year's timeline during the pandemic. And so when you look at what's possible when leaders are clear on what matters, when leaders are in alignment, it's absolutely incredible.
One aspect of that story that is really interesting for me as a Scrum Master is the powerful impact in creating a sense of being part of a team. Like you started by introducing the CEO as wanting to take on too much. Of course, that's a very common anti-pattern, right? That's why people eventually end up as CEOs, because they want to take on a lot. But in my own experience, it has been some of the hardest challenges for me as a Scrum Master and Agile coach to work with leadership teams, whether they are executives or department leads or even a multi-team leadership team, whatever that might be. And very often I get the impression that they are the ones that are the least organized, have the least productive meetings, have the longest backlogs with the least deliveries to show for it. And I can see how this could impact the formation of a team of that level, right? Because for me, executives and leaders are the ones that need a Scrum Master to help them the most, because they have a huge impact on the rest of the organization and not necessarily realize that. So it's interesting for me, Maria, to understand a little bit better of how the personal agility framework impacts that aspect of our work of creating a functional and productive team. How do you see it looking at that story, with the benefit of hindsight? What do you think were the aspects of the personal agility framework that helped in that journey of forming a team?
Yeah, so it was really the mindset shift. It was the mindset shift for the CEO to recognize that he didn't need to do it all, to recognize that he could trust the other executives, that they had medtech industry had a HIPAA compliant patient engagement platform and a lot of technology that they were dealing with, a lot of challenges just out in the industry with everything going virtual out of nowhere. And so, trying to overcome those challenges and being able to look at what was the real market opportunity and stay in alignment. And so really by being able to connect as people rather than just here's the list of things we need to do for work, it brought them closer together. And so it's really something about when we look at having a high performing team or a high performing organization, well, what are teams made up? They're made up of people. So when you can really, truly, genuinely connect with people as people and understand what matters to them and really make sure that you're in alignment with what it is that you're doing, being able to provide that clear direction, being able to delegate and trust rather than overseeing everything and trying to take it all on as the head leader. These are all things that come together. So I really think it's that human connection is a part of that, right? So people might think, oh, personal agility, that's not for business. That's for someone outside of work in their personal life. No, it's for individuals that are at a business. It's for each and every team member to truly grasp the Agile mindset.
And it's for the business as a whole. One of the things that we've been paying a lot of attention to, especially at the leadership level, is what's known as emergence. And emergence is how, individual things interact with each other to form something larger than themselves. So you can put a group of people in a room, but you don't have a team yet. It's not until they start interacting with each other, forming an identity, together, that they start to become a team. And it turns out that emergence is really driven by the behaviors between the people. And so one of the things that we pay particular attention to in personal agility, it's not the process, it's the interaction. So for instance, if you look at personal agility, it's all about questions. You can ask those questions to yourself, but you can also ask them to other people. And so one of the things you get good at when you do personal agility is you get good at asking questions. You get good at asking the right question at the right time. So then, we can kind of put the pieces together. So like one of the tools that we use is a thing called the stakeholder canvas, which is a series of questions to help people figure out what they really need to be working on. What is the goal? What's making it difficult? What are you afraid of? What are you frustrated by? And, when you're trying to craft alignment among a group of people with different perspectives, you can ask questions like this. And my experience is to ask it individually, not collectively, because if you ask people the questions before they're ready to hear it, they're going to start fighting with each other. But if you ask them individually and really listen to them, what you're doing is you're building trust with that person. And you can then start to shine a light on, well, you guys fight a lot, but what do you agree on? And it turns out they agree on quite a lot. Okay. And even where they're fighting, they agree that they got a problem that needs solving. And so you can kind of turn that around and say, okay, let's turn this into something positive. Okay. And so this is, well, why is this a useful technique for Scrum Masters or product owners for that matter? Well, every team has got stakeholders. On the product owner side of the equation, it's about people wanting something from the product. On the Scrum Master side of the equation, it's all those other departments in the organization that somehow need to do something to be helpful for the team, but need to be convinced why it's in their interest to do so. So, these skills of being able to create alignment are fantastically useful, both for Scrum Masters and product owners, so they can do their job. In fact, it's so useful, I now recommend it as the next step after your basic Scrum Master training. Learn how to create alignment in your organization. Learn how to really listen to the people around you. And, we've got, case after case now of teams and organizations where building alignment, either within the organization or in one case, we've got one going across organizational borders where, kind of creating that alignment and understanding has been, instrumental to the success of the endeavor.
So one of the things that you talked about that helps to create that alignment is to have those one-on-one conversations and ask those powerful questions, as you were describing. But holistically, how does the personal agility framework look at that significant, I would say, chore or task for Scrum Masters, which is to find and make clear what the alignment is or should be?
So like in my team right now, so I've been working as the quote chief agility officer for a startup in Zurich now for about 6 months, where I introduced Scrum in the leadership team. And one of the, let's say that personal agility influenced how we do Scrum very strongly. So the first thing that we did, and really the reason why we're doing Scrum in the first place, is we created alignment about what we needed to accomplish, what really mattered to the company. Okay. Now in Scrum, we have this thing called the product goal. There's one goal that we're working towards, and that's fine for product development. But when you're the leadership team of a company, you got more than one problem to worry about. You've got one place that you want to take the company, but you got all your daily business. So what we need to do is get clear and get agreement on what really matters. And especially, where that's really useful is sometimes that what really matters is going to push some people out of their comfort zones. They're going to be doing things that, like you say, well, I have my job and I'm going to make sure that our company doesn't fail because my job wasn't done well. But that's kind of a micromanaging perspective on your job. You're part of a team and the job is to win the game. And, if your skill isn't needed at that moment in time, do you insist on doing more of your skill, or do you go off and do something that's more useful for the good of the team? Okay. And when you get that what really matters kind of up on the wall in sight where everyone can see it, this gives you the possibility to kind of encourage people to do more of the right thing and less of the wrong thing. That's been really powerful at the leadership team level, having this common understanding of what we care about, because then we can agree on what we're going to do. Without that deeper why, well, then people are always, fighting. They all have their assumptions in the back of their head, and these assumptions are all a little bit different. And that's why it's so difficult for them to agree on things. So, if we take this back and say, well, how has it helped us? For instance, we had one case, the guy who was head of sales, and we had a goal which was about increasing the utilization of our product. Well, reaching out to new customers achieve the activation of our new product. And unfortunately, in the timeframes where we need to get our next round of investment, the answer to that question was no. That's a really big change for the salesman to say, oh, I've got to focus on activating our existing customers rather than acquiring new ones. But because we have this clear shared understanding about what really matters, it's possible to go in that direction and make that choice.
So what really matters is one of the questions that you've talked about. And there's, I believe, 6 questions that you talk about in the personal agility framework. So we've talked about what really matters, but walk us through the other questions. Let's take the next one in the order that you have it on the website, which was, what did I do last week?
Yeah, so this is a good tip. If you're not sure what really matters, you can look back at the previous week. We call it the breadcrumb trail when you look at what you've been doing over previous weeks. And it's an indicator of what apparently mattered. So sometimes people will say, well, I'm not sure what matters, or how do I even get started? Okay, well, what did you do last week? And are there any common themes? And there's clues everywhere. You can look at your calendar, your text messages, your phone calls, who you hung out with. And you can say, okay, here's what I did. Now, if I were to carbon copy this forward, is that what I want to happen? Is that getting me closer to the results that I want to create? And so from that, we can solidify what really matters, or we can ask ourselves a crucial question. Does this thing that I say that matters really matter? If I'm trying to focus on my health and fitness, but I just don't quite get around to it, well, does it matter to me? Do you want to be honest with yourself about that, or do you want to make a behavior change? So we look at, what did I do last week? And that can give us an indicator if we're on the right track. And then we start to go on down through the questions and look at, well, what could I do this week? So of the things I did last week, I could continue doing things like that, or perhaps I missed something completely that was important. So we want to start by looking at, well, what are the possibilities? What could I do? What are things that, we're just brainstorming here. We're not committing to it yet. And then we want to look at, well, what's urgent? Is there anything where something bad might happen if we don't get to it? So of the things that are important and urgent, then we actually come up with, what is my plan for this week? And once we have that, we have clarity on what we're going to do. We can see how it aligns with what really matters. And one thing we didn't mention yet is that we recommend, instead of just limiting the work in progress, which many Agile teams are familiar with that concept, we want to limit the initiatives in progress. So if we can have just 3 or 4 things that really matter, that can help us stay focused. As Peter and I both like to say, if everything matters, then nothing matters. So we want to keep that concise. And so from there, we can actually color code, what are the things that we plan to do? And we can see, do we have something from every category, or is there something where we didn't think of anything to do that week? And is that okay? Is that a conscious decision, or did we just forget? And then there's this final question of who can help, because often if you're not getting something done, typically you might be stuck, or there's some kind of roadblock, or just keep shifting out to the next day, to the next week. And so it's okay to ask for help, or you could delegate, or, there's a lot of freelancers out there in the world. You can hire someone to help with just about anything online. And so we can also look at, okay, am I on track? So it's really just to help us ensure, are our behaviors and actions in alignment with the things that we say that matter? And sometimes Peter and I will throw in an extra question, what would make me happy? So there's the things that you want to do. There's things that are your goals, but are you happy and fulfilled? Are these the things that bring you joy and fulfillment throughout everything that you're doing, so you can enjoy the journey along the way instead of just trying to reach a destination?
If we look at this, we started out with this question, why do we look at what did you do last week? And so here is the thing. Time is your most valuable, precious currency. You only get to spend it once. Okay. So the idea is when you spent your time doing something, what you're saying is that was really important to you. Okay. At least in the moment, it was really important to you. Now, maybe looking back at it, you don't feel so good about that decision. That's okay. It's happened, because what you can influence is looking forward. Okay. And so the idea is to bring what you do in sync with, or to align what you do with what you think really matters. And, having this question, what really matters, having those 3 or 4 Post-its up on the wall in front of you, reminding you of what really matters, well, that can help you achieve the goals that you want to achieve by, kind of reminding you what it is that you want to be doing. And every once in a while, there's going to be a disconnect where you realize, well, actually, no, that's not what really matters. This is what really matters. And I want to do something different. One of my first cases was a guy he'd taken over a company. He thought it was having difficulties before he took it over, but it was challenged. He thought he could turn it around. As time went on, things got tougher and tougher and tougher, and he had to let people go. And when you let people go, what do you do when you own the company? Well, you do the work yourself. And so he's now at the point where he's working 80 hours a week. And that's where I met him. And he was getting a little bit ragged and kind of wondering, what do I do? And how do I set my priorities? And so, we did this analysis. We talked to him about, he wrote down little stickies for everything he'd done. We color coded them. He ended up with 7 different areas. Remember, we said too many things. That's a lot of different things to have on your plate. That's, by the way, a huge problem for top management, because they often have, if we think you and I are multitasking, ask your boss or your boss's boss or your boss's boss's boss. They are multitasking like you wouldn't believe, because all that stuff that's why it's so hard to get time from them. But anyway, so we come back to Jörg, and he was, he said, well, I got these 7 things, lots of activities in each of these categories. So, he went off and started working on it. We met again 2 weeks later. We kind of reviewed what had happened, and he was still looking kind of exhausted, but, we went through the motions. And as he walked out the door, he realized, I've put down as my top priority, what really matters, save my company. I do want to save my company, but I also want to have a decent life. And that was this was kind of this moment of serendipity when he realized, the priorities have shifted. So he went home, came into the apartment, told his wife, honey, I'm home. I've come to a revelation. And she has barely seen him for the last year and a half. And she said, oh, that's interesting. What's your revelation? Remember that stuff about saving the company? Yeah. Well, I also want to have a decent life. And she said, okay, what does that mean? And he said, well, how about we go see a movie tonight? And at this point, she almost fell out of her chair. So you haven't suggested anything like that in a year and a half. And they went off to see a movie. So the thing is, when you get clear on what really matters, it makes it possible to change course. You can communicate that, and everyone around you will understand. Okay. And this applies at the level of a couple, but this can also apply very nicely in a leadership team or a board of directors or in a Scrum team. So that's why what really matters is so powerful.
This story that you just told actually brings up the topic that I think many of us are struggling with. Maybe we don't even have a label to put on it. And I think Maria introduced it as, it's not enough to limit the work in progress. You also have to limit the initiatives in progress. Mm-hmm. So Maria, break that down for us. What does that mean in very practical terms?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times, a lot of companies, you've got teams working, people working on multiple projects at the same time, right? Now, why is that? Well, if company use traditional project management, get all the requirements up front, they go into design, development, testing, and implementation, right? The waterfall approach. So what are the developers doing when we're in testing or implementation? Well, let's put them on another project. All right, well, what's the testers doing? Well, development's working on that stuff. Well, let's put them on another project. So now we have all these people spread so thinly across multiple projects. Back when I was a project manager, there was a time where I was a Scrum Master and a project manager on traditional and Scrum projects, and I had up to 7 projects. Now, Vasco, as good as I think I am at Scrum, I was running around doing the bare minimum from stand up to stand up. I was not able to be super effective as a Scrum Master with so much workload on my plate. I couldn't follow up on the roadblocks to the degree that I really needed to or should have, right? And so I was doing just the bare minimum to keep the plate spinning. And how many people do we know are like that? working on project to project to project. There was one day that our daily stand-up sounded like this. I haven't done anything since yesterday. I'm not planning to do anything today. And my roadblock are other meetings and projects. And every single person on the team said that. And so when we look at this, we've got all these initiatives in progress. I'm like, well, that's a problem. And so we're able to make an inch of progress on multiple areas, but not a mile of progress in any one. So I think the best example of this would be someone that we worked with, Walter, who had, and Peter can fill in a few more details on this.
30 people in the company and 30 initiatives.
Yeah, how does that work? And what were they able to get it down to, Peter?
Well, they worked on it for 2 years and they basically got nothing. None of their initiatives came to a satisfactory conclusion. This is where I got involved. And, we kind of taught them. I taught Walter personal agility. Walter is the guy, by the way, who coined the term, I want to end each week with satisfaction and start each week with confidence. Okay, because if you're the leader and you're run down and you've got this endless list of things to do, your energy is contagious to the rest of the organization. And so what they started to do was to basically apply a very lightweight version of Scrum to the work of the leadership team. And so rather than start these 30 initiatives and kind of make a little bit of progress on all of them, they broke their work into roughly 3-week sprints. They weren't so rigid about their sprints as typical development teams are, because business and life and things like that. But roughly, they set goals for roughly every 3 weeks. And when they worked on something in the leadership team, they always worked on it in pairs. And the idea was to get from a known state to a known state, that as every sprint, every initiative should produce some sort of tangible result. And either it's successful and they're happy, or it's not successful and they say, what have we learned? What do we want to do differently? And they literally, in 6 months, they accomplished, with this kind of agile approach, focused and working in pairs, what they'd been unable to achieve in 2 years previously. And so Walter said, Jeff got it almost right, with his twice the work in half the time. No. It's all the goals, half the work at a quarter of the time. And it turned out the reason was, very often they would do an initiative and it would solve the problem that they'd set out to solve, but it would also solve 3 other problems that they kind of, just as a very pleasant side effect. So it made them dramatically more efficient, and it made, it basically prevented his company from hitting a financial wall and turn around, and is now, they got new challenges with COVID, but, they were able to deal with the challenges back then.
The aspect that from my perspective that you mentioned is that once you focus on one initiative and you take it to conclusion, you very likely will have some positive side effects that you could not predict in advance, and therefore maybe not need all of the other initiatives, right?
Yeah.
But as you're working on all of them at the same time, you're, as Maria said, spread thin and get nothing done. That was a very good way to illustrate it. Now, you guys also formed the Personal Agility Institute. And before we finish off, I really wanted to give you guys an opportunity to share a bit more about what your vision is for the Personal Agility Institute.
So over the years, we've been noticing the incredible impact that personal agility has on people's lives. And one of them was a woman I met here in the Tampa Bay area. I got into the backseat of her Uber coming home and arriving at the airport. And we had a 20-minute ride and we started talking, and she was asking what I did. And we started chatting, and she was like, well, my dream's always been to be a private chef, have my own TV cooking show. And I was like, well, why don't you just shoot a YouTube show and create a portfolio? And she's like, I'm old. I don't know how to use YouTube. Like, I don't even know. And so I was like, well, come over to my place. I tell you what, I'll shoot your YouTube cooking show. And I just want to eat the food for free, because her food looked amazing. And she shared her Instagram. And so Sharon, her name was Sharon Gurin. We became friends. We started working out together. She's over 300 pounds when I met her. She said she wanted to have this weight loss transformation. And so I taught her personal agility. And the YouTube cooking show was going so well. She launched a catering company. It really took off. She asked me to help her with the business. So we started partnering on that. And she was working 5 jobs and barely getting by when I met her. She was negative in her bank account in December of 2019. December 2020, she brought in over 20 grand that month. In just the whole year of 2019, she had over $735 of insufficient funds fees that year, because she just was struggling to get by, even pay her bills. Her car was repossessed. Like, she had grown children that she was still helping to support. And so when I showed her personal agility, she realized, and we both realized, it wasn't just Agile that she needed in business. It was truly needing to change many things in her life to be able to be successful. And so 2019, negative in the bank account, 2020 cleared over 6 figures first year in business, 2021, even with the pandemic, landed a 6-figure client, private chef services. And so when Peter was in Florida about a year and a half ago, he met Sharon. And this is what inspired us for the vision for the future. And so, Peter, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, well, this was pretty cool because, Maria and I we wanted to take another shot at getting the book finished. And we're actually now finally at the point 2 years after that where the book really is almost finished. In fact, it should be on its way to Amazon by the time this goes on the air. Maria said, "Oh, there's this woman, Sharon, who'd like to meet you." And I thought, "Oh, that's interesting. Why does she want, or she wants to invite me to dinner?" And I said, "Why does she want to invite me to dinner?" And she says, "Well, to say thank you." Thank you for what? Personal agility. I thought, "Oh, wow, that's cool." And so we had dinner and we had this amazing dinner. It was 4 of us there. My wife was also there. And, she told us her story, and maybe you notice these little points like, her car got repossessed, a $400 bill was a disaster. And after I went back to Switzerland after we'd finished the chapter, that $400 being a problem, that's how should I say, that resonated. And so I researched a bit. And it turns out people ask that question, market research on a fairly regular basis. What percentage of Americans can't handle an unexpected $400 bill with easily accessible cash? What percentage can't handle a $1,000 bill? And it turns out at 400, it's about a third of the country. And at 1,000, it's about 2/3 of the country. If I remember the numbers correctly, I might be off by 1% or 2. But basically, the US is over 300 million people. So a third is around 100 million people and 2/3 is around 200 million people. And that is an awful lot of people. And I thought, wow, what if we could enable just 1% of them to have a transformation like Sharon's? What if we could, 1% of the companies could have a transformation like Walter's or Michael's? And so that's what the Personal Agility Institute is all about. Okay, we want to enable 1 million people to really measurably and obviously transform their lives for the better. That's what we're trying to achieve. That's why we're recruiting a network of ambassadors around the world to kind of share the knowledge of personal agility and help other people have these Sharon-like experiences of really transforming their lives for the better.
Yeah, that just invites me to say, you guys should have a YouTube show. Come on. Just interviewing those people. I definitely inspiring stories, guys. Thank you very much for sharing all of that. I mean, it is Christmas, so I'm sure a lot of the people are in that spirit of helping the world, and it's beautiful to hear your story. So thank you for sharing it with us. Before we go, though, where can we find out more about you, the work you're doing, and of course, the Personal Agility Institute?
Yeah, so on the website, personalagilityinstitute.org, you can read more about these case studies in more depth. You can join the community for free. Just create a login, be able to see a lot of people that are sharing their successes. And we also have some free tools available. So you can download the Personal Agility Guide and look at some ways to get started, see our courses that our ambassadors and trainers, different events that we're hosting around the world, from free meetups to training courses to help you become a recognized practitioner and apply all of these concepts of personal agility.
And Maria, where can people find you personally?
Yeah, so if you can spell my name, you can find me online, but otherwise just go to findmaria.com and you can click through to my website.
Awesome. Excellent. That's a great URL, by the way. And Peter, how about yourself?
Probably the easiest place to find me is LinkedIn. And the second easiest place to find me is on Google, or the DuckDuckGo. Peter Stephen Scrum will surely find me very quickly, either your search engine or on LinkedIn. I can give you the URL if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put the links all on the show notes, so make sure that you guys can find the Personal Agility Institute. Of course, also Maria and Peter. Maria and Peter, thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.